my friends, to a new episode of CELTA Insider. And in this episode, I'm going to talk about planning. And I'm going to focus today on aims. So let's start by checking how many types of aims do we have on the CELTA course. Let's go. So, on the CELTA course, we have 4 types of aims. Now, type number 1 is what we call main aims, and then we have subsidiary aims, and then we have personal aims, and finally, stage aims. And in this episode, we're going to see together how you can write these aims accurately in your lesson plan, and how CELTA tutors check aims in plans. So let's see. First, let's talk about main aims. And the definition of a main aim is: our main aim is the most important part of your lesson plan. And the reason why we say it's the most important part of a lesson plan is because simply this is why you're in the class. This is why you're teaching this lesson. And if you're unable to achieve your main aim on a CELTA course, then you are in danger of failing this teaching practice. Of course, it depends on at which stage of the course this might happen. However, a teacher who is unable to achieve a main aim is in a big trouble. Now let's continue reading the definition here. And it says, this is what you want the learners to be able to do or do better by the end of the lesson that they couldn't do at the start. And this last part is very important. They couldn't do at the start. Which means that your main aim has to be something that your students did. Someone might say, Shadi, what do you mean exactly by this? This is a very important point. I remember I was in a teacher training course at level 5, so at level CELTA. And I had this candidate at the intermediate level. And it was TP7 or 8, I don't remember exactly, but we gave the freedom to this candidate to choose his own material and whatever he wants to achieve his main aim. And his main aim was grammar, so he decided to teach the difference between can and could. Now this is a lesson that we might teach to people at the elementary level, or actually the A1 level, the beginners, the beginner level. But to teach that to intermediate, the question is, do they actually need to learn this? Don't they know that already? So, and again, that's why we say that your main aim has to be something that your students need to learn. And you don't need to worry on the CELTA course about this, because most CELTA tutors would give you your main aim and sub-aim and material for the first 60 Ps. And then they will give you the freedom on TP7 and 8 to choose your own material or develop your own material. Right, now let's continue. Think of your lesson in terms of you taking your learners on a journey. Yeah, I totally agree with this part here, because yes, a lesson is like a journey. It has a start and it has an end point. And this journey is full of stages. And these stages should have aims as well. And all these aims should lead to the main aim towards the end of the lesson. Right. And then your main aim is your destination. I agree. You should only have one main aim or 2 in a long lesson. I say on a CELTA course, most TPs are 45 minutes. Only one main aim, one sub-aim is enough, Right, but what about reality? What if you teach a lesson of 2 hours? Then you can have 2 main aims and 2 sub-aims. Fair enough, right. Now let's talk about subsidiary aims. And it says, you may have some subsidiary aims in addition to your main aim. Fair enough. These are aims that are not the main focus on the lesson, but are aims you hope will be achieved along the way on the journey to your main aim. And someone might say, Shadi, can you give us some examples? Yes. think about a grammar lesson. And in order to teach this grammar lesson, you decide to use a text. And this text carries the grammar in it. So again, now you have reading. Now reading is not the main aim because grammar is your main aim. So reading is a sub-aim. Nice. Now another example. Now you're teaching a speaking lesson. And in order for your students to speak, they need to be good at using some functional language. Like, I agree, I disagree, I can't agree more, and let's say all this. So again, your main aim will be speaking. Sub-aim, functional language. And it goes like that. Now let's move from main aims and sub-aims, and let's talk about CELTA and aims. Now what are we required to do with aims on a CELTA course? And I say, number one, identify them accurately. And number two, state them clearly. So there are two things that you need to do with a main aim or a sub-aim on a CELTA course. You need to identify them accurately and state them clearly. And this is what we're going to do in the coming part of the video. So let's go to an intermediate course book. And I'm going to use for that purpose a Straightforward by Macmillan Publishing House. Wonderful book. I really love it, and I really recommend it also for teachers and for CELTA tutors to use it for their TP points. Now let's have a look at a page taken from the intermediate level, 2nd edition, and let's try to identify some aims and state in them. Let's try to identify some aims and state them clearly. Let's go. So here we are, and obviously this is 1B, daily lives. And if you look here, it is clear that this lesson is listening and speaking. So listening is the main aim and the speaking here is the sub-aim. Now, how do we write this? First, let's decide on how many listening sub-skills are there. Let's go. And here, what does it say? Work in pairs, read the TV, review. What do you think the main differences between Michael Portello and Jenny Miner's lifestyles will be? Now this sounds like a prediction. And then this prediction is followed by what? Let's read this coming activity. Listen to the first part of a review of the TV program. Check the answers you gave in exercise 2. So this kind of listening is for the sake of checking prediction. So activity 2 is for the prediction sub-skill. Activity 3 is for listening for gist. Okay, good. Now what about this one? Listen to the second part of the review and answer the questions. That looks like listening for details. And then we have, listen again and complete the sentences. Okay, and this looks like listening for specific information. So if I want to write now my main aim, I will say to provide the students with practice in the following listening sub-skills: prediction, listening for gist, listening for details, and listening for specific information in the context of daily lives. So everything has to be specific. Okay. Now let's go to the sub-aim here, and the sub-aim here is speaking. So how do we write it? We will say to provide the students with practice in speaking about a politician in their countries that they would like to see in a similar TV program, and why, in the context of daily lives. Very specific again. Now let's go to grammar. And as you see, the grammar here, it said present simple and present continuous, and we have 4 functions here, 2 for the present simple and 2 for the present continuous. So we can simply say, to practice the grammar of the present simple and present continuous in terms of meaning, pronunciation, and form in the context of daily lives. And that's the main aim. Now let's go to the sub-aim of this grammar lesson, and let's go to another page to check. And we will see here that we have this vocabulary activity, and it says write 6 sentences about yourself using these time expressions. And we have now, usually, once a week, this week, never, at the moment. So there are 2 choices here if you're going to come up with a sub-aim yourself, which might happen on a CELTA course in TP7 and 8. Like main course tutors would give you the main aim, but they would leave the sub-aim to you. Then, if it is your choice, you might say this. My sub-aim is vocabulary, so you say to practice the vocabulary of time expressions related to the present simple and present continuous in the context of daily lives. Or, if we look at this grammar lesson, we see that it ends with 3, which is a semi-controlled practice because production is controlled here. So we need a freer practice. So we can actually get students to discuss these sentences and talk about themselves to each other after activity 3. Then that would be a speaking sub-aim. To provide the students with practice in speaking about themselves in the context of daily routine. Right. Now let's move to the coming vocabulary lesson here. And here we are, and it says verbs with 2 meanings. Some verbs can be both stative and dynamic, but the meaning changes. Lovely. So how do we write this main aim? We will say to practice the vocabulary of verbs that can be both stative and dynamic, but change their meanings in the context of daily lives. Now, as for the sub-aim for this vocabulary lesson, it can be this way: to provide the students with practice in speaking about the main political parties in their countries in the context of daily routine. Elementary course books. And I'm still using also Straightforward by Macmillan Publishing House. And my friends, this is taken from the elementary level. And as we see, the first lesson is speaking. Right? Wonderful. So let's state it. And it will be to provide the students with practice in speaking about packing their bags for a holiday to a big city in the context of travel essentials. Right. Now, if we look at this, we will see functional language here related to agreeing and disagreeing. So we would say, to practice the functional language of agreeing and disagreeing in the context of travel essentials. Oh, great. Now let's move to the following lesson. And we've got here another lesson on this page, which is reading and listening. So obviously the main aim is reading and the sub-aim is listening. Let's go and see. So it says here, the Thompsons are going to the airport. Read and listen to the dialogue. Who packed the bags, Walter or Thelma Thompson? Right, and it's obvious now that this is just reading. Now let's go to the coming activity, and it says, read the dialogue again and tick next to the things they have in the car. And I would say that this is reading for specific information and details. How? They have to put the things in the box first in the conversation. And then they need to read carefully to see whether these things are in the car or not. So they need to read for details. So if I want to write now the main aim, I would say to provide the students with practice in reading for just specific information and details in the context of travel essentials. Now, as for the sub-aim, let's look at this lesson and activity, which is number 4. Listen to Walter and Thelma at the airport. What's the problem? And again, that's obviously listening for gist. So we can write it this way. To provide students with practice in listening for gist in the context of travel essentials. And Bob's your uncle. Right. Another page from the elementary book. Now let's have a look at this grammar lesson. And it's about past simple regular verbs. And we can see here in the box that we have affirmative sentences, negative sentences, and interrogative sentences. So we can say, to practice the grammar of past simple regular verbs in the affirmative, negative, interrogative structures, along with their pronunciation in the context of travel essentials. Someone might say, Shadi, you didn't mention the meaning here, because the focus here is only on the structure and the pronunciation of these verbs, which is possible. Right. Now let's move to the sub-aim. Let's have a look and look at this. Got speaking here. So let's just take this is speaking sub-aim. And it will go like this. To provide the students with practice in speaking about what they did last year in the context of travel essentials. Right, now it is time to see how the sub-aims and the main aims are checked in CELTA lesson plans. And let's go through some aims and see the problems that might arise when candidates are writing their aims on a CELTA course. Let's see. So, we've got here a main aim and a sub-aim. Let's read the main aim. It says, by the end of the lesson, the students will be able to practice the present simple tense in the first person of its negative and positive forms in context of daily routine. Okay. Now let's read the sub-aim. By the end of the lesson, the students will be able to produce 3 habitual acts using the present simple in context of daily routine. Now, let's see my comments on these two. And I said about the first one, okay, well written. About the second one, I said, this is not clear here. And I asked this question, will that be writing or speaking? The reason why I'm asking this question is because look at the sub-aim one more time. Produce. Able to produce 3 habitual acts. Now, what kind of production are we talking about here? Because production can be in the form of writing, it can be in the form of speaking, but it's not clear from the sub-aim what the candidate means exactly. And I also asked, and what do you mean by 3 habitual acts? And when I put this, it means that it's not clear for me what the writer means exactly. Maybe because it doesn't make sense to me, maybe because it's not clear enough. Right, now, and the first one. By the end of the lesson, the students will be able to practice the past simple in its regular and irregular verbs in the context of famous films. Second one. By the end of the lesson, the students will be able to speak about the last movie they saw and with whom in the context of famous films. Let's see my comments. I said, For the first one, I put this, what function of past simple? Yeah, it's because you said past simple in its regular and irregular verbs, but what about meaning? You didn't say anything about the usage here. So past simple for what? Habits in the past or finished actions? What exactly? A second one, well stated. Right. Another example. Students would have developed their ability of reading for gist and reading for a specific detail in the context of exercising. In addition, students would be able to read, so that's the typo, a text and match it to a visual element in reference to an article with cartoon picture in a student's workbook. Bit too long, eh? Let's read the second one. By the end of the lesson, students would have gained an understanding of new lexis and will be able to know how to apply it in everyday life. Now let's check these two, and my comments on the first one. First, reading for a specific detail. Well, this is not clear. What does the candidate mean here? Is it reading for details or reading for specific information? Because it said reading for a specific detail. Now it's not clear for me. And in the context of exercising, fine. But he said after that, in addition, students would be able to read a text and match it to a visual element. That doesn't sound like a main aim to me. That sounds more like procedures, because you're giving details of the activity, and what is it exactly? No. In main aims, I want you to focus on the systems or skills and the sub-skills. Right. Now, I commented on the second one by saying, because he said understanding of new lexis. What lexis? You need to be more specific. I was talking about verbs, adjectives, and I was talking about verbs, what kind of verbs, right? In which topic? And I said, what kind of lexis here? And then how would you guarantee, and another comment for me, how would you guarantee this in your reading lesson? It's a reading lesson, but then in a sub-aim, he's saying that they will be able to know how to apply it in everyday life, talking about vocabulary. Well, I don't know, but sounds like a bit too ambitious for a sub-aim here. Right, good. Now, and again, this is the fourth example by CELTA candidates. Look at this. By the end of the lesson, students will have grasped the understanding of the future form be going to, referring to planned future events in the context of New Year's. They will know how to form both positive and negative sentences using the future form, whilst being able to differentiate the difference between positive and negative forms. Importantly, students will know how to apply the future form be going to in sentences through 3 or up. Too much. This is too much. And then moving to the second one. By the end of the lesson, students would have gained, suppose we would have gained, so that's a typo, gain confidence in knowing how to apply the future form be going to in the context of future events by having developed their oral fluency. This will be achieved through the students' discussion of the upcoming plans in the following upcoming year's term. My comments. And on the first one I said, this should be enough, along with a comment that it will be about the positive and negative forms. And in other words, I didn't want all this. I didn't want, they will know how to form both positive and negative sentences. No, I mean, just say by the end of the lessons, students will have understood, not grasped the understanding. No, understood. The future form be going to, and then in terms of meaning, pronunciation, and form, in the context of, and that's it. But 3 lines like these, too much. And about the second one, I said, please proofread your plans for inaccuracies, because you said would have gained instead of gained. Something else, think about this. By the end of the lesson, students would have gained confidence. Well, confidence cannot be a sub-aim. A sub-aim needs to be a skill or a system. how to apply the future form. Now this first part looks like the previous main name, because main name is about be going to. Why are you mentioning be going to again down there? And then he said, by having developed their oral fluency. Oh, so this is now speaking. So it's confusing the way he's written. So I believe this writer should have said to provide the students with practice in speaking about blah, blah, blah. And he would get the information from the activity he has in the course book, and he would add also the context, and that's it, end of story. But this is too much. Another example. By the end of the lesson, students will have been introduced to the meaning, pronunciation, and form of the target lexis in the context of studying, and would also be able to know how to apply what an object is missing here in both written and oral form. And then we have, by the end of the lesson, students would have developed their writing skills with a specific reference to educational experience and background. This would be done by applying the target lexis and focusing on the sub-skills of using the correct form of verbs. Too much. Now, for the first one, I said, what kind of lexis? True, you said the target lexis. What lexis? You need to be more specific here, right? Good. Second one, I said, what would be the context here? Because when you read, by the end of the lesson, the students would have developed the writing skills. Yeah, but again also, what writing skills? Are we talking about writing emails, paragraphs? Are we talking about letters? And also, if we're talking about letters, what else in letters are we focusing on? Layout, organization, style, formality versus informality. I mean, you need to be more specific here. And of course, the context is not mentioned. So the sub-aim is not good at all. Right. Another example. By the end of the lesson, students will have developed their oral fluency with reference to new stories. Students would also be developing their oral fluency by using expressional terms in conversation with the understanding of meaning and form and pronunciation. That sounds like double main aims here, but let's read the second one. By the end of the lesson, students would have developed their ability for reading for specific information by reading a summary of an event presented on the news. Students would have briefly memorized what they have read and applied in the oral fluency activity. So again, the second one also is it oral fluency activity. Is that speaking? And then you said reading in the beginning, so all over the place. And I said for the first one, I said that this part can be another aim, and I'm talking about the second part. Students would also be developing their own. No, I mean, as long as you think that this is a speaking lesson, they say simply to provide the students with practice in speaking about and mention what the conversation will be exactly about, and then the context of the lesson. And that's it. You don't need to mention this whole second part starting from students would also be developing. That's too much. And then when you move to the second part, and let's have a look at it together. By the end of the lesson, students would have developed their ability for reading for specific information. Okay, for a specific information in the context, you don't need to mention by reading a summary of an event, because now if you go like that, that would sound more like procedures. You know, talking about the activities and all that stuff, no. And then students would have briefly memorized. I don't know what memorization has to do here. So this last part is weird. And then, by the end of this lesson, students will have been introduced to the meaning, pronunciation, and form, and been given opportunities for controlled and freer oral practice of a lexical set of words or phrases in the context of life outdoors. And then the second one, the sub-aim, students will be able to develop their speaking skills in the context of life outdoors. And I would say there are problems in both. In the first one, as you see, a lexical set of words and phrases. What set of words and phrases? Be more specific here. Say, for example, adjectives describing people. A lexical set of adjectives describing blah, blah, blah. Second one, you said, be able to develop their speaking. Speaking about what? In the context of live outdoors, fair enough, but speaking about what? Try to be more specific here. Another example. One last example here. By the end of this lesson, the students will be provided with practice and writing emails in the context of their weekend. Students will be able to read 4 specific information in the context of inviting a friend. Now, and about the first one, I said, yes, but what areas of writing will you focus on? Very important. And I said, you need to be more specific here. Yeah, like what exactly? Writing emails, focusing on organization, focusing on layout, focusing on content, focusing on style. You need to say what you would focus on exactly in this writing lesson. For the second one, the guy said that students will be reading for specific information, and actually there was no reading for specific information in the lesson. That's why I wrote, if this is your sub-aim, I didn't find any scanning activities in your material. What do you think your sub-aim was? Okay, right. Now let's move to personal aims. And when I talk about personal aims are aims that relate to you as a teacher. These are aims about you. They're not about students. The aims you want the students to achieve by the end of the lessons are main aims and sub-aims. But the aims you want to achieve yourself regarding your professional development are personal aims. So, these are aims that relate to you as a teacher rather than the lesson itself, and will help you focus on your own personal development. And here is a lovely question that many people can ask. And how do I know my personal aims? It's my first TP. I don't know my weaknesses. I don't know the areas I need to work. And I would say simply, my friend, think about parts of the lesson that might be scary to you. What would be scary exactly? Is it, language clarification? Is it confidence? Like you think that you wouldn't be confident in front of your students? And the areas you think or the areas you feel you're worried about, you can put them down as personal aims. So you can say, I want to work on my monitoring because I feel this will be a bit problematic to me. Fair enough. As long as it is your first TP, fair enough. Right, you can write something like that. I want to work on my instructions in this lesson. I want to make sure that they are short and simple. Fair enough. But after that, in TP2, 3, 4, 5, on a CELTA course, you will receive feedback from your tutors and they will tell you exactly about the areas you need to work on. And simply you can take them and put them in that box in your lesson plan, and Bob's your uncle. So let's see some examples from real lesson plans. And here are some personal aims. So a candidate wrote this: to use appropriate pace when teaching. And the second one, you said, to work on making elicitation and CCQs quicker and more effective. And these were my comments. I said, you need to mention how you intend to do this. Which means that for me as a CELTA tutor, this is not enough. I don't want you to say, to use appropriate pace when teaching. How you would do that? I want you to write it down. Okay? Right, like for example, for the first one, you will say something like, to use appropriate pace when teaching by monitoring my students to make sure whether they finished the tasks or not before I move on to another stage. So this is now clear to me. For the second one, to work on making elicitation and CCQs quicker and more effective by demonstrating and asking ICQs more consistently. So this is what we expect to read. Another example. And someone wrote here, providing feedback on the content of activities and the language. Monitoring learners more effectively to know when to move on to the next stage of the lesson. Give clear and short instructions. And I said, look at my comment here. Have you missed a recommended area to work on from your previous TP? And this comment means that there is something important that the candidate forgot to put here. And I mentioned this in the previous TP. And that's why I say, please go back to your feedback sheet and check. And then I wrote down here, you still need to work on this like as a kind of an agreement to what he wrote. And of course, there is still a problem also in these personal aims, because the guy is not saying how he will handle this. Right, now let's move to stage aims. Let's go. Each stage in your lesson framework must have an aim. Fine, as we said before, a lesson is like a journey, and this journey is made up of stages. And for every stage in that journey, there has to be an aim, and all these aims have to serve the big main aim. Right. So, a rationale for why you're doing this during the lesson. This aim must enable the learners to move forward to achieve the main aim. If it doesn't, that's a problem. You will need to reconsider the rationale behind this stage. Like if you feel that the rationale behind this stage doesn't lead finally to the main aim, then there is a problem, and a serious problem, and you need to address this. Right. Okay, now my friends, in this coming part, I will provide you with a lot of help. I will provide you with all the stage aims needed for the 7 frameworks you will need on a CELTA course. The 3 frameworks used for teaching language, and the 4 frameworks for teaching skills. And my friends, if you want more information about any of these frameworks mentioned here in the video, then please go to the playlist Frameworks on our YouTube channel, and you will find detailed explanation of each one. But for now, let's have a look at the aims of language frameworks. And here you are. Now it's very important to take a screenshot of this and keep it on your laptop if you're in a CELTA course. Now we have here the TTT, the Test, Teach, Test, and the PPP, Present, Practice, Produce, and the TPP, Text-Based Presentation, with all their stages and the stage aims as well. So this is something that you can use as a source for you. And I believe after that, with experience, you will not need to go back to this, because everything will be on your mind. Right, now, and let's move to receptive skills frameworks, stage aims, and here is another gift. And this is for reading and listening, with all the sub-skills you can imagine, with also their stage aims as an example for you. So this will make your life super easy when you're writing your stage aims in a lesson plan for a CELTA course. or any other course. Right, good. Another gift, a third gift actually, productive skills framework, stage aims. Haha, and here you are, speaking, product writing, process writing, the stages and their aims. So your screenshots, my friends, and keep these on your laptops. You will really need them if you're on a CELTA course, or even a TEFL course, or a CERT-TESOL course, you name it. Now let's see some examples of stage aims and the problems that might occur when you're writing your stage aims in a CELTA lesson plan. Let's see. And here we are. Oh, look at this. So let's focus on the second column, because this is where we have the stage aim. And let's read it. To develops. Title first is to develop, right? Students' ability to read for specific information. Okay, and then to develops, another typo. To develop students' ability to match text to visual pictures. Let's see my comments. And I said, for the first one, please be careful here. Your stage name contradicts your stage aim. Ha ha ha. Because what is the stage name? Reading for detail. And what is the stage aim? To develop students' ability to read for specific information. So the stage name is for intensive reading, and the stage aim is for scanning. And these two are different things. Okay, right. And then I said, reading for specific information, scanning, is different from reading for details, intensive reading. Now about the second part, to develop students' ability to match text to visual pictures, I said. As for the second stage aim, is it one of the aims delivered to you in the Receptive Skills Framework handout? Which is the part that I asked you to take a screenshot of. Please check this. Because again, that looks more like procedures, not a stage aim. You know, it doesn't make sense that, you know, that this is the reason to match a text to a visual pictures. No. Good. Now, another example, and focus on the second column. The first one has the stage name, and the second column the stage aim. Let's read it. To develops, again, so it seems that this is, you know, going on. To develop students' ability and confidence in speaking. Okay, second one. Also to give the students a chance to utilize any information or lexes they have learned in the lesson. Let's see my comments. And then for the first one I said, yes, but why speaking in a reading lesson? Ha ha ha. It's because this is taken from a reading lesson now. Then why speaking? Why do we have speaking in a reading lesson? Because he said to develop students' ability and confidence in speaking, but this makes it sound as if the main aim of the lesson were speaking. But actually no, the main aim was reading in this lesson. So this was not the right way to write it here. And that's why I said to my candidate, if this is the aim provided to you in the Receptive Skills Framework handout, please recheck it. Because the one in the handout will be more about how to respond to the reading text, okay, in speaking. Good, lovely. Now, second part, I said, the second part of your stage aim makes your lesson sound as if it were a vocabulary lesson. This was a reading lesson. Why do you say here to give the students a chance to utilize any information or lexes they have learned in the lesson? What is that? No, it's not a vocabulary lesson to write this here. Okay, lovely. Another one. And again, let's focus on the first two columns. So we've got practice, that's the stage. And then the candidate says, to get students to recognize where to put the positive or negative form of the target language through reading and writing. For me, I mean, that sounds a bit weird. Let's see what I said. I said, please try to use more academic language when writing your stage aims. you have not mentioned what type of practice this will be. I don't know. To get students to recognize where to put. What do you mean where to put the positive or negative form of the target language? This is not academic language. That's why it's not clear. Through reading and writing, what do you mean exactly? Writing is freer practice. Reading is, I don't know. So no, of course not a good example here. Right. Content feedback. To engage with the students about the topic of the lesson and establish rapport. In content feedback. That's weird. Look at my comment. It said, your stage aim here sounds more appropriate for a lead-in rather than a feedback stage. Please think of the rationale behind content feedback in comparison with language feedback. And by saying this, I'm trying to drive my candidate to go back and check the handouts given to him or her with the stage aims ready, and also to think about that. But of course that wasn't a good example. Another one. Language feedback. Let's see what the candidate said. To highlight any grammatical errors students made during a lesson. That's my comment. Is this type of feedback related only to errors? Because when you put this stage aim to highlight any grammatical errors, it means that you will not comment or praise good usage. And of course, in language feedback, we want to see both praising good usage and also, error correction, this and that, right? And another example, we've got the teacher stage, and it sounds like this comes from test, teach, test. So this is the teacher stage. And the candidate says, to teach target lexis. And that's what I said. As for your stage aims, you mentioned you will teach the target lexis. And my question was, all of it? Because if it is test, teach, test, this means that in the teacher stage, you will select the areas that were problematic for your students in the first test. And saying that you'll teach the target lexis, what do you mean by this? You need to be more specific here. And what aspects you will cover exactly? You need to say meaning, pronunciation, and form. And your stage aim needs to be more detailed here. Okay. Another example. And we've got preparation. It seems that this is taken from a speaking framework. And it says, to prepare students for the main speaking activity whilst they achieve the sub-aim of reading for information. And then I said, your stage aim is not clear here. What sort of preparation will that be? So the candidate should have written this, to prepare students for the main speaking activity by providing them with the information they would need to use when they're speaking through a reading passage. That would make more sense. Right. One last example. Useful language, and it seems that this is also taken from a speaking lesson. Introduces students to the target lexis in the given context to prepare students for the speaking task. And I said, in your stage aim, why did you use the term target lexis? Because when you say target lexis, this sounds as if your lesson were a vocabulary lesson. And that's why I asked, is this a vocabulary lesson? And actually, no, it's a speaking lesson. So why are you using target lexis here? Because that's a wrong term here. It's not right. Okay. So my friends, we came to the end of this episode of CELTA Insider. And we focused on how to identify aims accurately and how to state them clearly. And we talked about 4 types of aims on the CELTA course. We talked about main aims, sub-aims, personal aims, and stage aims. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much, my friends. Bye-bye.